Today on EARTHFILE, I am Ayola Kasim. Natural disasters forced 32.4 million people from their homes in 2012, with climate and weather hazards such as floods and slumps causing 98% of the displacement. The total almost doubled the 2011 number as major floods hit India and Nigeria last year, accounting for 41% of global disaster displacement. That is according to the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center. The figures capture only the impact of rapid onset crises and exclude droughts, which are slower moving and harder to track. In the two biggest events of 2012, monsoon floods uprooted 6.9 million people in India's northeast, and in Nigeria, 6.1 million people were newly displaced by widespread flooding in the rainy season. Over the past 5 years, some 144 million people have had to leave their homes in 125 nations because of natural disasters. The vast majority staying in their own countries. The figures vary sharply from year to year according to the number and scale of the largest disasters. But in general, the risk of displacement is expected to rise in line with global trends that make people more vulnerable, the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center warns. Exacerbating factors include population growth, rapid urbanization, and the growing exposure of vulnerable communities and their homes and livelihoods to hazards.
For example, the increase in urban flooding has a lot to do precisely with how we plan cities, not with nature, but against nature.
We've just got more and more property, people, assets, infrastructure in hazard-prone locations.
Human-made climate change is expected to increase the frequency and severity of weather-related hazards in the longer term.
The studies we've done in this report tend to show that in general, there's still fairly weak incentives for actually getting disaster risk factored into urban development.
Over the past 5 years, 4/5 of disaster-driven displacement has occurred in Asia. But in 2012, Africa had a record high for the region of 8.2 million people displaced, over 4 times more than in any of the previous 4 years. The report highlights how rich countries are also affected by disasters, with 1.3 million people forced from their homes in 2012. The United Nations was among the top 10 countries with the highest levels of new displacement, at more than 900,000 people, largely due to Hurricane Sandy in October last year and forest fires. Nonetheless, people in poor countries remain by far the worst affected, the report said, making up 98% of the global total displaced by disasters between 2008 and 2012. Displacement in Africa reached a 5-year high in 2012. During the year, 8.2 million people were newly displaced compared to 665,000 in 2011. Flood disaster-induced displacements across 13 countries in West and Central Africa compounded the vulnerability of people already facing severe food insecurity and displaced due to conflict and violence. Chad, Niger, Nigeria, and South Sudan were worst affected. Chad had the highest per capita level of displacement of all countries, and the floods in Nigeria created the second largest displacement event.
In fact, available records indicated that Nigeria experienced the worst flooding in more than 80 years in 2012. Reports show that about 27 states were flooded.
In considering the global patterns from the past and into the future, experts found that between 2008 and 2012, at least 144 million people were displaced by disaster. China, India, Pakistan, the Philippines, and Nigeria had the highest numbers displaced in 2012, and as a total from 2008 to 2012. The risk of displacement is expected to rise in line with the increasing risk of disaster, even as more people are surviving disasters due to better early warning. more are becoming displaced. Increasing numbers are exposed and vulnerable. Climate change is projected to influence the frequency and intensity of weather extremes over the coming decades. Displacement takes a toll on both the richest and poorest countries. 2.5 million people were displaced in high-income countries over the past 5 years, including in Japan and in the United States, both among the top 20 countries with the most displacement from 2008 to 2012. The 5 largest events during this period each forced between 6 million to over 15 million people from their homes. The world's 2 largest events in China, the 2010 monsoon floods and the 2008 Sichuan earthquake disasters, the 2010 monsoon floods in Pakistan, and 2 major flood disasters in 2012 in India and Nigeria. Experts believe that more must be done by government to prevent and prepare for disaster-induced displacement and ensure people at risk are protected.
Governments bear the primary responsibility for disaster risk reduction. But the level of risk is also related to the where and how of investment by the private sector, which is responsible for 70 to 85% of worldwide investment in new buildings, industry, and critical infrastructure.
Meanwhile, the United Nations has warned that economic losses from disasters have spun out of control and have called on the world's business community to incorporate disaster risk management to their investment strategies in order to avoid further losses.
Let us not shy away from the meaning of these numbers. Economic losses from disasters are out of control. They can only be reduced in partnership with the private sector, including investment banks and insurance companies. For too long, markets have placed a greater value on short-term returns than on sustainability and resilience. At long last, we are coming to understand that reducing exposure to disaster risk is not a cost, but an opportunity to make that investment more attractive in the long term.
The set of large disasters which occurred in 2011 and 2012, the Great East Japan earthquake, the Thailand floods, Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand, and more recently and near Hurricane Sandy here in this area, have really been a wake-up call for business and the private sector in terms of the impacts that disasters can have on them.
In its Global Assessment Report GAR13, the UN found that direct losses from floods, earthquakes, and droughts have been underestimated by at least 50%. In this century alone, losses from disasters have amounted to some $2.5 trillion. Annual average losses from just earthquakes and cyclonic winds can be expected to be in the range of $180 billion this century.
So the report is really trying to focus us on where the opportunities are against the background of the catastrophic losses that too many countries have suffered, not least in the past decades. And that this opportunity can only be built on everyone's participation and sense of self-interest in engaging in the opportunity.
There is good news, which is less people dying. There is also bad news, and the bad news is the economic losses are going through the roof.
The report, which reviews disaster in 56 countries, also highlights how the transformation of the global economy over the last 40 years has led to rapid increases in disaster risk in low, medium, and high-income countries. GAR 2013 analyzes 3 key global investment sectors: urban development, agribusiness, and coastal tourism, and reviews that prevailing business models in each sector continue to drive disaster risk.
The economies of a lot of the small island developing states, whether it's in the Caribbean, in the Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, typically depend on tourism income for the value of 40, 60, 80% or more of their exports. So what this means is that, a disaster in the tourism industry is not just a disaster for the hotels and for the people who own the hotels and the resorts. It becomes a disaster for the economy as a whole. A lot of this investment is going into areas where the hazard, drought for example, poorly understood, poorly modeled, poorly mapped. So it's very difficult, I think, for these companies to calculate the risks to themselves.
We need to redefine how risk is measured and understood in a global economy, and at the same time understand that undermining natural wealth or the natural disasters that do come along is also connected to financial instability.
Global trend analysts say that 21 years after the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, we haven't even begun to change direction in addressing the challenges of climate change. Meanwhile, at a time when the world is dealing with myriad challenges from climate change to food insecurity, Director General of the World Health Organization says it is more important than ever to ensure that public health receives both the attention and resources it deserves to ensure the well-being of millions.
Influenza viruses constantly reinvent themselves. No one can predict the future course of this outbreak. Going forward, we must maintain a high level of vigilance. I cannot overemphasize the importance of immediate and fully transparent reporting to WHO and of strict adherence to your obligations set out in the international health regulations. I am most pleased to inform you that well over 9 million people living with HIV in low and middle income countries are now seeing their lives improved and prolonged by antiretroviral therapy. This is up from 200,000 people just 11 years ago. And this is the fastest scale-up of a life-saving interventions in history. For tuberculosis and malaria, once again, I want to thank all countries for the efforts you have put in. Recent progress has been encouraging. But it is increasingly clear to us we are threatened by the spread of resistance to mainstay medicines. Universal health coverage reflects the need to maximize health outcomes for everyone. Everyone, irrespective of their ability to pay, whether they are women, where they live, where they are from, should have access to the quality health care they need without risking financial ruin.
But back here in Nigeria, the Minister of Water Resources has warned that there may be massive flooding like that which eroded many parts of the country in 2012. Although she said Nigeria and Cameroon have reached a substantial level of understanding on how to prevent an occurrence of the devastation caused to Nigerian communities last year, the Water Resources Minister urged state governments to clear drainage and evacuate people from floodplains. The Nigerian Meteorological Agency also predicted rainfall with a possible flooding in some low-plains areas.
We all agree with me that one of the widely discussed transboundary issues across the globe today is the climate change challenge, which has led to a wide range of disasters like drought, desertification, flooding, ocean storage, tsunamis, and windstorm, among others. As we predicted last year, using the seasonal rainfall predictions, the pattern of Lagos rainfall and southwest states will not be different from the 2012 predictions.
Based on this report, some states in the northwest region, such as Sokoto, Kebbi, Zamfara, and virtually all the south-south states have also been designated flood-prone areas. Some of the states affected last year say they have taken appropriate steps to avoid floods this year.
Because we don't want to experience the kinds of calamity we experienced last year, the state government has embarked on various means occurrence of flood disaster in Kwara State. There is consistent stakeholders meeting with the people from the flood-prone areas on a periodical basis. There is the construction of bridge at Buka, Adana community, in Moro local government. There is the construction of water channels at Agabiata Daniel in the South local government. Not only that, the state government has also embarked on construction of water channels at Tanke area. There is the construction of embankment against overflowing of River Niger at Shogatada in the local government. This is done in order to prevent flooding.
Ignorance is no longer an excuse. And inaction on the part of government and society amounts to conspiracy against our collective survival. We are removing every illegal structure that is blocking any waterways. It interests you that even the state government built a school on a natural waterway. We have removed that school. I want to urge my colleagues, and I will get to them, that we must be on the driving seat just in case the flood happens again.
Who has built on a floodplain, who was built on a stream, who was built in a place that will not allow the water to flow seamlessly, should be ready to hear from me. I have given instructions to the Ministry of Physical Planning and Land to ensure that those houses are demolished.
It has been predicted that rainfall will commence in Lagos between the 4th and 2nd week in March, with a margin of error of 3 days as probable onset days for year 2013 rainy season. This prediction is being further confirmed with the rains which has come in torrents on Saturday and Sunday, March 1st and 2nd, 2013, as well as Monday 4th, 2013 respectively. It has also been predicted that the end of season for year 2012 rainfall is 17th of December. That is the end of rainy season for this year, with a margin of error of 4 days, which is between 13th and 21st of December 2013 as probable days. Gentlemen of the press, from the year 2013 rainfall predictions, Lagos State shall experience a rainy season of about 249 to 275 days, with intermittent stoppage in August. The magnitude of Lagos seasonal rainfall prediction for this year is that Lagos will experience every rainfall of high intensity with thunderstorms just like last year. Lagos is expected to record a total of 1,722 mm with marginal error of between 21 and 179 mm. Every thunderstorm has also been predicted to occur during the rainy period of June, July, August, September, and October. Lagos, like other coastal cities in the world, is prone to flooding, and several global occurrences can attest to this. However, like I did say in my opening statement, we commenced our deployment program at the end of last year's rainy season. We intend to sustain and strengthen last year's strategy, which is predicated on these programs. First is the pre-rain program between January and April 2013, the mid-rain program between May and August 2013, post-rain program between September and December. Other programs put in place by this ministry to reduce the incidence of flooding include massive clearing and dredging of primary and secondary channels collectors in the state, expansion of existing drainage channels in order to contain more storm water, the lining of many arch channels, strengthening of resident engineers and drilling maintenance officers to oversee drilling matters in all our local government and local government development areas across the state. In spite of all this, very little can be achieved without the collaborative efforts of the Goshians. I have said it over and over again that global occurrences around the world now point to the fact that no nation can promise a flow-free environment any longer. Even the most specialized countries in the world can no longer promise a flow-free environment. However, what we can promise is a reduction of floods in regards to minimum mistakes.
Predicted, and everyone saw what happened last year and the year before. All we can hope for is that everyone does his part to ensure this year's rain has no damaging effect. That is our package today on EARTHFILE. Thank you for staying tuned. You can view the entire program again by visiting our website, channelstv.com/EARTHFILE, and our inbox, earthfile@channelstv.com, is always open for your comments or questions. From me, Ayola Kasim, and the rest of the team, bye for now.